Welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. This is episode number 75. I'm your host, Conrad Weaver. Thanks for joining me today. My mission with this show is simple. It's to bring you powerful stories and practical insights that inspire you to live a life of wellness. Because, as I often say, wellness is not optional. Ashley Jones knows this truth firsthand. She's been serving as a police officer for the past 12 years, and while the job itself has been filled with trauma and intense pressure, she shares that much of her stress hasn't come from the streets. It's come from within the organization. In today's episode, Ashley opens up about her personal wellness journey and the pivotal role that vulnerability and self-advocacy have played in her healing. When her agency failed to provide the mental health support she needed, she took matters into her own hands. Through her research and resilience, she not only found her own path to wellness, but is now helping and empowering others to do the same. You don't want to miss this conversation, so stay tuned. But before we dive in, if you're a regular listener, I'd be incredibly grateful if you'd leave a 5-star review and a review on Apple Podcast. Your feedback means the world to me and helps others discover the show. If you think someone in your circle would benefit from this episode, please share it with them. That's all I ask. Thank you so much. And now let's get into my conversation with Ashley Jones. Well, Ashley, welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the program today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So you have to tell us a little bit about who you are. I first ran across your TikTok account, and you were posting stuff about first responders and mental health and wellness. And so I thought, here's someone I need to talk to. So here we are. So tell us about who you are.
So my name's Ashley Jones. I'm a full-time police officer in Central New York, and I've been in law enforcement for over 12 years now. And I also started my coaching business about 3 years ago called Pearl Grit Coaching. And I am an empowerment coach for first responders.
Okay. So first of all, let me back up. What got you into police work? What motivated that journey?
Insanity. So I come from a family of first responders. My dad was in law enforcement. He was a police chief. I have a lot of uncles that were corrections officers. It's always just something that I've kind of leaned into. Now 12 years into it, I wish I leaned into something else, but it's been a rewarding, but also stressful environment. But I'm glad I did it, but that's really why I got into it. Just family influences.
So, you got into coaching as well. What motivated that? I mean, you going after 12 years, and I read on your website where you said something about, I'm no stranger to the darkness.
Yeah.
What inspired that comment?
So there came a time where I needed to be my own hero. I wasn't brought with a lot, or I wasn't taught about a lot of resources to kind of help me through certain struggles. So a lot of things that I had to learn when I was going through dark times was just self-taught. And I wanted to be my own hero and then that resource for other first responders who are potentially going through similar struggles.
What was the biggest thing in law enforcement when you got into it? Maybe you were a year or two in. What was the biggest thing that surprised you about that job?
The lack of actual brotherhood. Everybody preaches it, but quite honestly, at least around here, it's not really there. It's a fake brotherhood. So that's probably what surprised me the most.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not really sure. I mean, everybody has their own history and their own reason for doing what they do. I think that the brotherhood is just preached and instilled in you in the academy, but just because it's taught doesn't necessarily mean it's valued with that specific individual. So you can preach it all day long and you can lead the horse to water, but if it's really not something that's instilled within them, they're not going to follow through with that.
Some of the people I've talked to here on the podcast, in fact, Chief Neil Gang that I had on the show a couple weeks ago, he's a big proponent of, developing a culture that is healthy. And do you think that's kind of what's lacking in some law enforcement circles where it's, they talk about the culture of brotherhood, but it's uh, not really cultivated or not really, done in reality.
Sure. I do believe the first responder culture does have a certain level of toxicity. Um,
Mm,
and that just, it comes from that individual, and then it comes from the stuff that we see and we deal with, and that we don't know how to properly process that. Um, but there's people who will be your fake friends, but they're really only there to help you if somebody passes away or something like that. They're not with you through the normal day to day life.
hmm There's an officer in my film who talks about, um, had backup when she was on duty, when she was making the crazy calls and, they were responding to stuff and she had backup. But when she was off duty, and she was having struggles, there wasn't backup. Is that something you've experienced too?
Yes, and I actually just got chills when you said that. So obviously, your film resonated with me. I do feel for her, and while I was actually watching that, I was very empathetic to what she was going through because I feel like I completely understood everything that she was saying.
Hmm. And do you think, I mean, what needs to happen to change that?
Um, egos need to change. We need to drop the fake facade. We're not all okay. I fully believe
Mm,
that if we all took a psych test as being a first responder for at least 1 year, we would not score or pass the psych test like you did when you entered your career. We all have issues. We all see a lot of things, and we don't process it and actually deal with it. We suppress it. So um, those things would need to change first, for sure.
hmm hmm What do you think should happen, perhaps even back at the academy level, for people coming into this profession? What needs to happen there to prepare officers, prepare firefighters, first responders for the job?
So I've thought quite a bit about this because at least with my academy, they touched upon this stuff, but it wasn't anything that was discussed in length. But I think something great that would be added to academies is vulnerability training.
Mm,
So teaching your first responders how to be vulnerable. Because if you learn that level and that level is accepted, we're going to be more comfortable sharing our stories.
mhm, mm. Can you describe that a little bit more? What type of vulnerability needs to happen?
Um, Knowing that everybody makes mistakes, your setbacks aren't a failure. Something that you may deem as a weakness is not necessarily a fault. Um, Evaluating yourself as a person, doing your shadow work, understanding your triggers, just all of that stuff encompassed so that you know that sharing your story is not going to be something that's off-putting. It's something that's more acceptable to your teammates out there.
Mhm. And so what are some things you do, or where in your, actually, let me start with this. Where in your journey did you start realizing that this job is really impacting you and you need to do something about it?
So I first started out as a peace officer, and I worked for a local college for a while. I was a sergeant there. Everything was fine while I was there. I would have to state that about maybe 2 to 3 years into my actual street policing career, that's when I could notice like a shift in my personality, to
Mm,
where I was more of like a recluse, or I was doing things that I shouldn't be doing, like indulging in behaviors that weren't beneficial to my health. So that's when I started to really look inward to be like, why am I like this? And I never wanted to join the force and have it change me. I always
mm,
said that if I became that salty dog, like I need somebody to let me know because that's not how I want to be in my career. I want to be as kind as I was when I first started. I don't want to be cynical. I want to still be helpful. So when I started noticing that I was going down, that's when I knew I had to pick myself up.
Hmm. Did you have any examples, any good examples in your sphere that you could say, you know what, that person has done some things that they're really working on themselves? Did you have anybody to follow like that?
Um, Mainly just famous people. So like
Mm-hmm.
people that like I caught on podcasts or like scrolling through Instagram. Those would more or less be my mentors, that like
Mm-hmm.
strangers that I don't even know. But those were the ones that were most uplifting for me. And I think Trent Shelton. He's a ex football star, I believe. Um, don't quote me on that because I might be
Mm-hmm.
wrong, but
Mm-hmm.
his videos were very inspirational to me. His book's very good. David Goggins was great. He's a little bit harder than my personality is, but I did enjoy his viewpoint and it was very motivating. So, certain things like that, that's what I really tapped into to kind of help kickstart everything.
So you really had to kind of dig for yourself to find those resources and those inspirations.
Yes, because I didn't have them in a close relationship in my personal life. So,
Hmm. And what was, when you started working on yourself, was there any, did people around you notice that, or did your fellow officers, did they say, hey, what are you doing, Ashley? What are you working on?
no,
No.
no, no. Whether I'm happy or whether I am upset, I actually have made most of my connections with strangers online. Um,
Hmm.
Going through the process of self growth and healing and all of that stuff, I have definitely made more of a connection with strangers than I have anyone that's close to me.
Hmm. Growing up in a law enforcement family, you probably, had some early exposure to things that the average person probably hasn't been exposed to, especially if their family member wasn't in law enforcement. Did that impact you in any way?
Not negatively by any means. My
Hmm.
dad will continuously say to this day, like, I hope that I didn't get you into this career because he knows how crazy it is. You know what I mean? But
Hmm.
um, no, nothing that negatively impacted it, only stuff that made me proud of who they are. And then it makes me proud of what I do as well. So.
Hmm. So, at what point did you, when you started working on yourself and working on your mental health, what some of the things you did to help yourself get to a better place?
I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of audiobooks, like listen to them. I was practicing like breath work. So when I'm really struggling, my breath work that I refer to is just box breathing or tactical breathing.
Hmm.
Um, I was meditating more consistently at that point. Right now, tapping helps me a little bit more. Um,
So, describe tapping for those who may not know what that is.
So you're saying positive statements while you're tapping like meridian points. I'm not super knowledgeable on everything that comes with it, but you're tapping certain points like your palms, the top of your head, your temple area, under your eyes, and it provides like a calming and more focused effect than being stuck in your brain.
Hmm.
Um, so just doing all of that stuff, those are the things that really helped me. I've tried journaling. It's not really my thing. Workbooks are more my thing, but essentially those are what really helped me to grow and continue to grow today.
Hmm. And do you think that, law enforcement is something you're going to continue in the future, or is that something you're going to, kind of have a shift in your future endeavors?
I'm praying for a positive shift. I have gotten to the point where I'm very much over it. And it's not even the streets. New York State is very hard to be a law enforcement officer, in my opinion, because of the legal system. So you
Mm-hmm.
can go through all the process, you can make these arrests, but then people don't actually get convicted of those charges. So New York State is very lackadaisical, and the usually the criminals have more rights and powers than the actual good citizens. But
Mm.
I have more of a morale trauma issue. So I have worked in very toxic departments. So that is mainly why I want to get out of law enforcement, because I've noticed the negative effects that it's had on me.
Hmm. You know, the National FOP in their wellness surveys every year, they have said the top two stressors for law enforcement is uh, institutional or is organizational uh, conflicts and issues. Would you
And
concur with that?
yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Because I love helping people. I have so much compassion for others, but it's the actual inner workings of usually the departments that is my breaking point for sure.
Hmm. What needs to change that? What needs to happen to change that?
Better leadership is really what it comes down to. There's a lot of leaders that are either very old school or they're just not necessarily educated in what makes a good leader a good leader. And there's very different ways to be a leader, but you
Mm.
need to focus on your officers and what's best for them, regardless. Um, I have never had a leader like tap into why I am the officer that I am.
Mm.
Or if I'm pulling back and I'm not as productive at work, they've never said, "Hey, I see you slipping up on A, B, and C. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?" I've never had that. So even just check-ins, wellness programs, that would be helpful. I know some agencies, at least not around here, do those things. But unfortunately, I have never worked for an agency that does do that. So
Mm. Wow, that's unfortunate. I've seen the whole gamut of this. In fact, a lady who's on my podcast yesterday, the episode that came out yesterday, you know, her son died by suicide, and he was an officer in the Boston area. And when he died by suicide, it was a very public thing because everybody kind of knew their family. And but the chief never, to this day, has never talked to the family.
and that is unacceptable.
That's crazy.
But I feel like the agencies that I've worked for would be the same way. They might like say sorry, shake your hand, but I have a feeling it would be similar. And that's just completely unacceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just as a human being, that just makes sense to care for the people that, you know, are working for you. Right. And
Right.
to empathize or at least to, you know, and in the show, the lady was like, yes, you know, the chief knew that if he would call me, he'd get an earful, but that still shouldn't matter. You should still, as a human being, human to human, you should, you know, reach out. I mean, that's just normal.
Oh,
This, you know,
absolutely.
it's decent.
Yeah. But I would have to say that that's that chief not wanting to accept accountability for his role that he played in the decline of that officer's mental health. So
Hmm. So, what are some of the things you're doing to help others? You're listed as an empowerment coach. What does that mean?
So initially, I had my life coaching certification, I think probably in 2019, give or take 2018. I didn't
Hmm.
really know what I wanted to do with it. And then time progressed, and I'm like, I really want to help other first responders the way that I know that I needed help. Um, and then I received another certification, I think about a year and a half ago. I became a certified mindfulness coach. So then I was identifying as a life coach and a mindfulness coach. And I'm like, well, I want to get more certifications. So can't just list all my certifications. How do I go about presenting myself in one word statement that isn't confusing to anyone who's seeking me out? So I
Hmm.
established the empowerment coach because the work that I do will empower you and it will help you become a better human in that aspect. So,
Hmm. So, your website's called Pearl Grit Coaching.
yeah.
What's the significance of Pearl Grit?
um, I encourage anyone listening to go check out my website, and it is defined on there, Pearl Grit. It did take time for me to come up with that name. And prior to last year, that was actually when I had a Facebook account. That was my name on Facebook. I did like a soft opening with Pearl Grit, and everyone's like, "Oh, who's Pearl Grit?" And then boom, I announced my business. So it kind of like
Mhm.
intertwined with each other.
Mhm.
So the Pearl is just like I said, I would rather people go to my website and then just check it out. And then they would be able to get a better understanding. But that a lot of time and thought went into that name for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, I think when I think of a pearl, a pearl forms around something in the oyster, right? That's
Yeah.
irritating the oyster, so it creates this secretes this stuff around uh, something that brings, I guess, brings healing to the oyster. I guess I don't know. Um, so I can see how you do that. So, do you work mostly with first responders, or do you work with the general public as well?
So I chose first responders as my niche or niche, however you say it.
Hmm.
I chose them because that's what I'm most versed in. But I
Hmm.
can obviously expand that to the right person if I thought fit.
Hmm. So, what do you hope to accomplish through your coaching? What do you hope to accomplish in your own wellness development?
That's such a loaded question for me
Mhm.
because I hope to accomplish a lot. But the main thing is I want to help someone the way that I helped myself. I want people to understand that their life is worth it, that they are powerful, they can do anything that they want to do. And that's more of the coaching aspect. But for personal goals that come with that, there's a lot of projects that I want to work on, which include a book, a workbook, but all of that will come in time.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, well, you have some challenges, and you've overcome some of those challenges, right? And what do you think drives you to overcome those challenges? What's the or what's the source of that inner strength that kind of directs you to really help yourself?
Sure. Um, I'm a very resilient human being, and I'm a very determined and stubborn human being. So
Mhm.
the combination of those is what helps to continue me to move forward. Because motivation isn't it. Like I'll get a quick motivation to do something, but motivation, you can lose that. You truly have to be determined and consistent with anything that you want to change in order to see those results. So I just try to stay focused on what my goal is, and then I try to break that down into smart goals, and then I just stay determined and consistent, and then eventually I'll get there.
Mhm. And what would you say to a first responder who's listening, who perhaps is perhaps there where you were a few years ago, struggling, through the darkness, dealing with the stuff that they deal with, and not knowing what to do? Maybe they're in a toxic environment as well. What would you say to them? What's a good first step for them to move out of that?
They have to be ready to get comfortable being uncomfortable. They do have to show that vulnerable side. And if you don't trust reaching out to anyone that's close to you, there's so many resources out there, me included, that if I can't help you, I will link you to someone that can help you. I had to do a lot of my own research, but you really have to be your own advocate if you want to change your life.
Hmm. And regardless of whether your command staff or leadership uh, promotes that thing, you're still responsible for yourself, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're taught to police yourself, at least for police officers when you're in the academy, and usually that means like your uniform, make sure it's spiffy, nice, looking great. But you really have to focus on your mental health more so than your physical health, in my personal opinion. So you have to take care of yourself because nobody else is going to do it for you.
Hmm. Law enforcement people spend a lot of money on resources like ballistic vests and new vehicles that are state of the art, and which is all important, the right weapons, the right, all the right tools to do the job. But when it comes to spending money on things like mental health, sometimes that's like, why do we need to do that? What do
Hmm.
you think needs to happen with budgeting in first responder agencies to put more emphasis on mental health?
So what I've noticed is that it doesn't necessarily matter the agency's budget. It comes down to that specific individual's budget.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of things that even your agencies won't train you for, that you have to step out of your time and space of your actual working schedule, and you have to train yourself. So you're expected to go to the gym, stay physically fit, take jujitsu, all of these things. You want to buy all the tactical cool gear, but what are you doing to protect your brain? Your brain is what drives your body. So if your brain is not good, you can go to the gym every day. It's not going to help you, because your brain has to be just as good, if not better, than your physical health and your tactical gear. Um, so, as much as I am an advocate for wellness programs within your agencies, it also comes down to that officer as well, because if your agency isn't on board, you have to be able to take that shift yourself and spend the money on that for you.
Mhm. So what's one thing that you're looking forward to in the near future?
I'm looking forward to, like, if I had to manifest, I would love to get out of toxic department culture. Um, I would like to manifest either a great retirement for myself, um, a workbook for first responders, without divulging too much, and then a book as well. And with
Mhm.
that, that would help. Between that and my coaching, it would help provide enough of a income to where I wouldn't have to worry about street policing any longer. So that's
Mhm.
what the happiness goals for me are for the future. But
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome. Is there anything else you want to add to our discussion? Anything that's front of mind for you around the area of mental health and wellness in the first responder world?
um, just don't give up and act like the person you want to become. If you don't like where you are, take actionable steps to make those changes. You don't have to remain stuck. That's a fallacy, in your mind. You have every right to move forward. You're the only one telling yourself that you can't. So just take that motivation and get determined and make those changes for yourself.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, where can people find you and how can they get in touch?
So I do not have a Facebook any longer, but I have an Instagram that's Warrior with Grace. My TikTok is Warrior with Grace 2.0. And then I have a website as well, pearlgritcoaching.com.
And I'll be sure to put those links in the show notes as well. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for being on the program today. Thanks for the work that you're doing. And I'm
Thank you.
glad you have taken the effort to work on yourself and now to help others. So,
Sure.
so that's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
By the way, if you'd like to connect with Ashley, check out the links in the show notes below. Also, be sure to visit our website for the latest updates on upcoming PTSD 911 screening events. See if we're coming to a city near you, and if not, let's connect and work together to bring an event to your community. And please remember that you are not alone. And if you need someone to talk to and don't know where you can turn, you can dial 988 for help. Until next time, be well, take care of yourself and those around you, and go out and do something great in the world.